Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Hundreds of Syrian Christians have gathered from across the nation in a desperate bid to defend one of the last Christian enclaves from ISIS. Since the end of October, Islamic State militants have driven thousands from their homes in and around the western Syrian town of Saddad. But the Christian fighters have thus far prevented the jihadists from advancing to the city center. Syrian Orthodox Patriarch Ignatius Oprim II visited Saddad recently to encourage the Christian fighters to defend their homeland. Meanwhile, a little bit of good news. ISIS released 37 Christians who were kidnapped in February, most of them elderly men and women. They were among 253 Christians taken in an ISIS sweep through the region. Negotiations for the release of more hostages are currently underway. More than the English Channel is dividing Great Britain from the rest of Europe these days. With the threat of an Anglo exit, Prime Minister David Cameron laid out his government's demands for European Union reform and a more flexible UK membership. Among the provisions outlined on Tuesday, Cameron is calling for the EU to cede power from a growing central government in Brussels back to its member states. He's insisting that the UK be allowed to control its immigration policy by restricting benefits of other EU nationals. He's also seeking financial reforms and UK protection from the liability of a potential euro crisis. More fundamentally, Cameron stressed that Britain wanted a clear, legally binding and irreversible exemption from the EU's mission for an ever closer union.
That will mean Britain can never be entangled in a political union against our will or be drawn into any kind of United States of Europe. We don't believe in it. We do not subscribe to it. We have a different vision for Europe.
Cameron acknowledged that getting the other 27 nations to agree to Britain's goals would be a major challenge, but not mission impossible. The European Commission had a different view, calling some of the issues raised by Cameron highly problematic. Britain will hold a referendum by the end of 2017 on whether to remain a part of or leave the EU. And lawmakers in Germany's parliament have approved euthanasia. Assisted suicide in Germany had previously been a gray area of the law, which was neither allowed nor banned. Not anymore. The measure, which was passed by a wide margin, would permit doctor-assisted suicide for, quote, altruistic reasons. However, the commercialization of the practice has been banned. Critics of the new law fear that the parameters of assisted suicide could expand in time. Back in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Supreme Court announced that it would take up a challenge to Obamacare's contraceptive mandate from religious nonprofit groups, including the Little Sisters of the Poor. The case is similar to that of last year's landmark Hobby Lobby decision, where the High Court ruled that closely held for-profit companies are exempt from the mandate, should its owners have a religious objection. Arguments are expected to be heard in March. A decision would likely come down June of next year. And another legal setback for President Barack Obama on immigration. By a vote of 2-1, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with Texas and 25 other states who claimed that the president's executive actions to shield 5 million undocumented immigrants from deportation was illegal and would burden the states to provide them with benefits. The court panel rejected the White House argument that the executive actions merely shift the enforcement priorities of the existing law. Administration lawyers said the president will appeal the case to the Supreme Court. The justices could take up the issue during the court's current term. And immigration was front and center at the Republican presidential debate on Tuesday, with some bright lines of division being drawn among the candidates. Texas Senator Ted Cruz rued that illegal immigration is driving down the wages of American workers. He rejected those who characterize his insistence on legal immigration as being somehow anti-immigrant. He and Donald Trump continued to call for the deportation of those in the U.S. illegally. Ohio Governor John Kasich and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush both rejected that idea as impossible. More on the GOP debate and the fallout later in the show. And two Italian journalists who published confidential Vatican financial information could be prosecuted by church authorities. Holy See spokesman Father Federico Lombardi announced on Wednesday that the Vatican is investigating Gianluigi Nusi and Emiliano Fittipaldi, who last week released two bombshell books revealing alleged waste, greed, and mismanagement at some of the highest levels of the Vatican bureaucracy. Much of the information was dated. The books were based on leaked documents from Pope Francis's Financial Reform Commission. Two members of that commission have already been arrested by Vatican police in connection with the leaked documents. And Pope Francis made two more major bishop appointments in Europe this week. Bishop Juan José Omaya becomes the next Archbishop of Barcelona, Spain, and Bishop Joseph de Kessel takes over as Archbishop of Brussels in Belgium. Archbishop Omaya, who has been called the Maradiaga of Spain, that's a reference to Pope Francis's top lieutenant, Cardinal Oscar Maradiaga, who advances a progressive outlook for the Church. As for Archbishop de Kessel, asked about gay people, he said, "I have much respect for gays, including their way of living their sexuality." He also said that women's ordination is negotiable. Both archdioceses are typically cardinalatial sees. Put that smartphone away when you're eating dinner. That was Pope Francis's message to families during his Wednesday audience. Continuing his weekly catechesis on family life, the Pope said Christians have a special vocation to foster family closeness, which is manifested at the dinner table. Moving off script, he said, a family that rarely eats together or spends their meals staring at smartphones or the TV is hardly a family. That, he said, is a hotel. He bemoaned the end of the family meal, a great symbol of togetherness, disappearing in some societies. The Pope stressed that the dinner table is the place where Christ chose to teach his disciples. And a true American hero received the nation's highest military honor on Thursday. Florent Groberg received the Medal of Honor from President Obama during a ceremony in the East Room of the White House. Groberg was a U.S. Army captain in 2012 when he tackled a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. 4 people died in the attack, but he saved the lives of many more. Groberg spent 3 years in recovery. His left leg, badly damaged, necessitated 30 surgeries. Ahead of the ceremony, Groberg said he's accepting the award to honor the men who died next to him.
You know, that's what we need to talk about. That's the guys that you need, the true heroes in all this. It's the guys that didn't make it. I'm here. I'm talking to you. I'm telling the story, and you know they want to give me a medal for it. Medal doesn't belong to me. It belongs to those 4 guys. Medal that belongs to those 4 families.
This being the week we honor our veterans, a special thank you to Captain Groberg and all the men and women and their families who sacrificed to protect our freedoms. Thank you all.